Welcome to Random Movie Reviews. I'm Nathan, and today I'll be talking about Braveheart. Yes, I'm still wearing a robe like I did in my last video because I'm still fighting a cold, still feeling kind of icky, but I still wanted to talk about a movie. A movie that I had never seen before, which may be kind of surprising to some people, but every cinephile out there has a handful of iconic, well-known movies that they just haven't gotten around to yet, and Braveheart was one of those films for me. I wasn't avoiding this movie. I just hadn't gotten around to it, and I was like, you know what? I'm still sick, and I still don't have really anything else to do today. I'm in the mood to watch a long, epic movie. Time to knock Braveheart off that list. And I watched it off my triple Blu-ray DVD here that comes with Gladiator and Saving Private Ryan for some reason. Funny enough, I did a video on Gladiator already. And of these three movies, there's one film that is significantly better than two of them, and that is Saving Private Ryan. Now, I will say, while there are elements of Braveheart that I really enjoyed, I'd be lying if I said that I found the film to be a completely satisfying experience. There's a lot to admire about the movie, but I also have quite a few nitpicks and gripes that hold the movie back from being truly great, in my opinion. And so, I know a lot of people love this movie. This is one of those movies where, similar to Gladiator, in fact, Gladiator has quite a few similarities to this movie. And for anyone interested, I'll put my Gladiator review in the description below because I think Gladiator's kind of overrated, and I feel kind of similar about Braveheart, if I could be totally honest. Both movies are directly related in the sense that they're both historical, very loosely historical-based epics that revolve around our lead hero character wanting to get revenge. They're both very simple stories with simple, ultra good guy characters going against ultra scummy bad guy characters. There's no moral complexity. There's not a ton of originality in terms of the storytelling or in terms of exploring these characters. But the movies both excel on a technical level. Braveheart in particular is a really good-looking movie and still holds up today visually 100%. All of the movie is done with practical effects. There's no CGI. The music is fantastic, and the costumes, everything about it is all great on a technical level, but the story does feel somewhat lacking. Now, I will say that when this movie first started, about the first hour, maybe even hour and a half, the first part of the movie all the way up to like the first epic battle where he gives his freedom speech. From that point, I loved the movie from the beginning to that point. Once we get towards the second half of this movie, it started to meander quite a bit, in my opinion. The pacing and the momentum and the excitement from the first half of the movie started to fall off a little bit for me in the second half. There's an introduction to a secondary romance side plot that I think is kind of terrible, if I could be completely honest. And then we get to an ending that, you know, is trying to be quite heartfelt, but felt kind of just to me in terms of a movie being very obvious, trying to milk emotions from the audience. And I didn't really feel that emotionally connected to it. We'll get there. But for those who may not know, Braveheart is loosely based, but almost an entirely fictional version of the story of William Wallace, who is very well known in Scottish history and lore. The movie is telling a fictionalized version of his story, him living in Scotland from a child to a grown man, where he ends up meeting a woman, falling in love. They end up marrying in secret because the tyrannical English are instituted prima nocta, which means they get to deflower people's brides.
I'm sorry, I had a very different understanding as to what prima nocta meant.
Even though historically speaking, there's no evidence of that ever happening. But it works for this thing of the movie. You see, I don't judge the movie based on it being historically inaccurate, because I knew very well that this movie was criticized for being quite false with its historical depictions. And because of that, I went into the movie like I went into Gladiator, just for entertainment. You know what I mean? Just like, all right, this is historical fiction. I'm okay with that. I'm going to judge the movie based on that, not based on how accurate or inaccurate it is. I'm going to base it just on it being a movie. So after his beloved wife gets killed due to her defending herself from a soldier that was trying to sexually assault her, that's when William Wallace decides to gather up his Scottish brothers to officially go to war against England. They're sick of their tyrannical, evil, scumbaggy ways. And that's pretty much the movie. It's a very, very straightforward movie. There's nothing wrong with that. However, when you have a movie that's this straightforward, that doesn't have a ton of substance in terms of the story, in terms of its characters, the 3-hour runtime starts to feel a little bit much and not necessary. I'll be totally honest. This movie could have probably been about 30 minutes less than what we got, or you could cut out maybe even 45 minutes. There's a lot of what kind of feels like filler in this movie, and I have a similar issue with Gladiator, where it's like there's a lot of talking moments in Gladiator, and if those moments were dedicated to giving our characters a little bit more complexity, or giving our villains a little bit more complexity, or just adding something of any sort of substance, then I would love those scenes. You don't really get that in either Gladiator or Braveheart, and it just started to feel a little bit just kind of like, okay, I get it, the English are evil, William Wallace is super good, he's a Christ-like, Messiah-like figure, and there's just, it's like, I get it, I know who's good, I know who's bad, so let's just get to the goods, let's get to the action. And there is a lot of action in this movie, and like I said, the battle sequences in the film are pretty incredible, and they're worth the price of admission alone. It's a well-directed movie, visually speaking. Mel Gibson, I'm a big Mel Gibson fan. I should have probably said that at the beginning. I love Lethal Weapon. I love Road Warrior. He's a very, very good actor. He's in movies that I consider to be all-time classics. When it comes to his directorial stuff, this is only the third movie I've seen of his that he directed. The first two being Passion of the Christ. What was that one called? Hacksaw Ridge, I think? Yeah, Hacksaw Ridge, the war movie with Andrew Garfield, which I was not a fan of at all. That movie felt so hokey, emotionally speaking, and so just kind of sanitized, and then the war sequences were so over the top, it was kind of ridiculous. So wasn't a fan of that movie, not a fan of Passion of the Christ at all. My problem with Mel Gibson as a director is that he comes off like he doesn't have faith in his audience, so he has to beat them over the head with the most obvious types of storytelling and bluntness, and he doesn't believe in subtlety. He believes in being quite gratuitous, not just in terms of violence, but in terms of just showing how good and righteous the good guys are, and how terrible and evil the bad guys are, and there's no middle ground. There's no moral ambiguity. It's all very surface level, very obvious, very blunt, and it's hard to get seriously emotionally invested in a movie whenever a filmmaker does that, where it's like, I want to get invested, I want to get emotionally invested, I want to take these characters seriously, but when you have a character like William Wallace, who's pretty much just like perfect, he's the perfect man's man. He's smart, he's capable, he's funny, he's charming, he's an epic warrior, and there's no like complexity to that. But one of the things that would have helped me enjoy this movie is like, okay, if you're gonna go full on war, action, revenge, then embrace that, and then cut out all of the fat. Cut out all of the fat, cut out all of the unnecessarily long expository dialogue sequences, cut out the subplot with Wallace having another romantic interest in the princess character after his wife dies. That felt almost completely useless, and then we get to the end of the movie where it's like, oh, that's the revenge on the king, where the princess, is begging for William Wallace's life. The king, who's on his deathbed, he's sick, he refuses. She's like, well, guess what? You know what? I'm pregnant, and it's going to be Wallace's baby, so fuck you. And I rolled my eyes so hard, I was like, that's so stupid. Not to mention that the romance comes out of fucking nowhere. It is completely half-assed. The chemistry between Mel Gibson and that actress, who I'm spacing on her name, but I know her from The World's Not Enough, very beautiful. But there's just no chemistry between them. It feels super forced and completely unnecessary to the plot. If this movie was a lot shorter and it had better pacing, all of the flaws that I'm complaining about now, I wouldn't care. I'd be like, this is a fun action-adventure movie. Who cares if it's somewhat on the shallow side? At least I had fun. At least the pacing was good. But no, it starts to fall off, starts to really drag in the second half. Then we get the sequence where, you know, Wallace gets tortured. He sees his wife in the crowd, and the whole time I'm thinking, I'm like, well, he's going to have to explain to her that he just banged another lady, got her pregnant just to get back at the king. So that emotional sequence that Gibson was trying to have with the audience is completely undermined because of this forced secondary love story that is not historically accurate and has no reason being in the movie other than to get revenge on the king. So there's just a lot of decisions made in this movie that really kind of bothered me, and there are two ways that would have been beneficial to this movie. The first way is, like I already talked about, if the movie was shorter, more streamlined, embrace the action more, cut out all of the boring shit, then I would enjoy it more. Or if you make the movie 3 hours long, then you spend a good amount of time building up the characters, getting rid of that stupid ass side plot with Wallace and the princess. Give them a little bit moral complexity, do the same thing with the villains, give it a little bit more substance and not this phony, heartful sentimentality. So anyway, that's my thoughts on Braveheart. I'm sure people are going to disagree with me because it's like similar to Gladiator. People fucking love this movie and think it's the greatest thing ever. That's fine if that's your opinion. All I ask is that you respect my opinion, even if you disagree with it. But I want to hear from you guys. What are your thoughts on Braveheart? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do you love this movie? Do you hate it? Mention it in the comments below. And as always, thank you guys for watching.